Hey guys, my name is George and welcome to the channel. In this episode, I interviewed Karl Enriquez, who is a first-gen Latino. He's an MBA graduate and successful entrepreneur and businessman. And I have three main takeaways from this conversation. Number one, the importance of family. His family instilled a sense of hard work, discipline, and resilience that have helped to propel him towards success. Number two, your socioeconomical background does not predetermine your success. Just because you don't come from generational wealth does not mean you cannot outperform those who do. Number three, if you want to become an entrepreneur, you must become comfortable with variables of change and have the capability of pivoting with new information. Hope you enjoyed this content. If you do, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and enjoy the show. The goal is to just give people a glimpse into the life of, my guests and their stories, because obviously success isn't a straight line, right? It's like zigzags. You take a step back, take two steps forward. There's failures along the way, trials, tribulations, all that. And so I just want to give people sort of, alternate pathways to life, to living their life, or just give them some ideas or encouragement throughout. So, I want to highlight your life, your experiences. We don't have to get super personal, but definitely want to talk about your journey to, within business, your journey through academia and so forth, and how that all, impacted your personal life as well. And I think it's very valuable, especially being first gen, for people like you to have this platform to be able to share those stories and your successes. Obviously we're in Texas, so we hear so much about, the border and all the negative stuff, but we don't hear about the good stuff. And I want to make sure that, people like you get recognized. So, but yeah. So before we dive in, can you tell me a bit about your upbringing, your childhood? What was that like? What was the plan for you, if any? Give me a little idea.
Yeah, so I'll start with my folks. Like I was mentioning before, my father is the oldest of 12.
Wow.
And my father is an immigrant. Like he's from San Luis Potosí, Mexico.
Mm.
And my mother, she's the oldest of three, and she's an immigrant from Cuba. My father came to this country when he was 19, and my mother came to this country when she was 12.
Wow.
My mother was so around the time that my mother immigrated to the U.S. She came by herself with well, I shouldn't say by herself, but she came just her sister, my aunt, and my uncle, and they were sent out of Cuba at the time when Castro had just come into power. So there was this mass exodus of children that left Cuba, called Los Niños de Pedro Pan, or the Peter Pan children. And it was a mass exodus where a lot of parents, they sent their kids to the States for asylum once Cuba seized power in the country. So a lot of those children, they went into boarding schools where they were received by a foster family. Right. And so my mother and her siblings were received into a boarding school in Colfax, Washington. It's a Catholic boarding school.
Wow.
So it took my grandmother a couple of years before she came over stateside. And then, they were reunited together. My mom, she was kind of at 12 years old, she was the mother.
Wow.
I'm the youngest of three. I have two older brothers. They're 10 and 11 years older than I am. So I'm 37. My older brother, he's 47. He just turned 47 in October, and the oldest one, he's 48.
Wow.
Yeah. So my oldest brother, he's a veteran. He was a veteran in the Navy. He's good. And he works in lending now for a bank called Amity Bank. The middle one, Nestor, he works in marketing and sales for Radio Univision Radio down in Houston. So he leads the marketing sales department there.
Yeah.
And myself, I work in beverage sales. I work for a organization called Spindrift Sparkling Water. I'm a field sales director for them.
It's awesome, man.
You asked about, plan, kind of upbringing.
Yeah.
So my brothers and I are first generation. My parents are naturalized citizens. They became citizens pretty early on, I think before they actually met. My parents met in Chicago. My brothers were born when I was born down in Texas.
Yeah.
And I'm originally from Houston. Fort Worth area when I was about 21 years old to go back to college.
Yeah.
Coming up. Go ahead.
I was gonna ask, I'm curious. So, having parents that came from that kind of environment, right, or in their early lives, how did that impact your upbringing? What kind of values and vision that they instill in you and your brothers?
Yeah, huge impact. My father's a very educated man. My mother, she is a scrapper and a very educated person as well. My father is a hustler, man. He's put together a lot of his own beats, with his own two hands. There's a level of expectation in our household that we were going to succeed and move forward from there.
Yeah.
Right. The thought process was that my parents did a lot of the hard work to get us into the starting lineup.
Yeah.
So that way we could create the life that we wanted. Right. Life that they didn't have. Like my father's family was dirt poor coming up, man. And my mother's same. And so there was a certain level of expectation and accountability and discipline that was expected in our house.
Yeah.
My brothers being 10 and 11 years older than I am, probably got the brunt of most of the challenging aspects of it. I think by the time I came along, my pops was a little softer with me.
Yeah.
Took a little bit more of a collaborative approach, so to speak, as our brothers would call it.
Yeah. I can relate to that.
But,
I can relate.
Yeah.
I'm the oldest of four. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm, four boys at that. So it was definitely rough with me. But then I see my younger brothers and I'm like, oh, y'all have it pretty nice, But I think
I feel for my older siblings, man, because I feel like they got a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
Right.
100%. Yeah.
When you come along 10 years after like a decade worth of raising these other two guys, you have the luxury of hindsight, and it's just like, all right, I'm back in the swing again, right? Like, so if I could do anything different, what would it be?
Yeah.
And so, like, I think for my siblings, the stakes were a little higher for my parents because like by the time I came along, my parents were a lot more established.
Yeah.
They had more resources, right? But there was a certain level of expectation that we were going to achieve, succeed. Education was a must. Yeah. Right. We played sports, primarily soccer and tennis.
Nice.
We played a lot of soccer and a lot of tennis. I think I probably got a little bit more adventurous. I played rugby when I was like in 5th grade. Started playing football. The middle one was a natural athlete. Like Nestor is an incredibly natural athlete. Like you could pick up anything and be like pretty good at it.
Wow.
Right.
That's awesome.
We all were given like certain innate, qualities and and had some values instilled. Like my oldest brother has a great deal of charisma. The middle one, he is a very hard worker. Right, very hard worker. And me, I kind of got like a little bit of everybody because I came along so later where my brothers had a hand in raising me. Right, so I got a little charisma, I got a little hard work, I got a lot of hustle, I got a lot of empathy from my mom. And then I got the opportunity to just kind of swirl it all together and put my own spin on it. So
was
very fortunate.
Yeah, it sounds like it, man. That's a big advantage. Was there any pressure being in that position in terms of the expectations? Like, look, your brothers have made it. They lived up to expectations. Now it's your turn. Did you ever feel that? Or was it just like, like you said, you had more mellow parents and, you had those examples in front of you, so it wasn't as much?
Yeah, I don't think there was as much pressure from like a take a look at what your brothers are doing standpoint, but there was a
Mm,
certain degree of pressure of like, hey man, like, your brothers and you are responsible for, the establishment of our family here in the States, right?
mm,
Like,
wow.
you guys are the legacy, right? And I remember my father telling us all the time when we were growing up, like, you are fortunate to have been born in the most powerful country in the world with the most amount of resources and the most diversity of paths to find success.
Yeah.
The only question is, how you're going to wield that and how you're going to manifest that,
Yeah.
right? But hard work was expected. Laziness was not appreciated, despite the fact that I was a little lazy at times.
Yeah. We all have our moments.
Yeah, discipline was something like my father is a very disciplined guy,
Mm,
right? So he expected a certain degree of attention to certain things that were important that he prioritized as being high stakes,
yeah.
right? So it was our education, it was our level of competitive edge, and that was kind of bred through sports,
Yeah.
right? And it was the importance of seizing opportunities in front of us.
Right.
Like, A, because you can't let opportunities go to waste, but also B, because they come from families that didn't have those kinds of opportunities afforded.
Right.
And there was a certain degree of preparation there, where it's like, hey, you're not going to have all the things that you want or all
Mm,
the things that you would like really really like to have, but
mm,
you're going to have everything that you need to be
wow.
successful,
Yeah.
right? You're going to have a fresh set of clothes that are always clean. You're going to have warm water, electricity, plates full of food, right?
Yeah.
Nourishment, love, but also discipline.
Mm,
You are going to be prepared to undertake those things, right?
yeah.
You and the expectation is that you ball hard, right? Like, you might not have come from generational wealth, but that doesn't mean that you can't outperform those who do.
I love that. Yeah.
So there was a certain level of expectation, and even like, I had the luxury of spending more time with my father than my brothers did, because my
Mm,
father, he worked a lot of hours. He worked second shift, right,
yeah.
which means that he was typically, and even for like an early part of my upbringing, he was typically asleep in the mornings when we would be getting ready for school. And like, my
Mm,
mom would like, she would handle all the stuff in the evening. My pops wouldn't come home till like midnight, like, 'cause he worked second shift. He would
wow.
do stuff there around the house when we weren't there, right?
Wow.
He tackled all the responsibilities, major overarching responsibilities to keep things moving for us.
Hmm.
um and but yeah, like, I spent most of my time with my pops on the weekends.
That it sounds like he was a very devoted father, like, and because that takes a lot of selflessness, right? It sounds like your parents really prioritized you guys, obviously your education. Did they have specific plans for you guys, like, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be an engineer, or was it just like, hey, utilize these tools and figure out something that's going to bring, honor and success to the family?
So my mom wanted us to be stand-up human beings. Like,
Mm,
that was the one thing that was really important to my mom. My mom's a religious person. We're Catholic. We grew up going to church.
hmm.
What was important to my mother is that we grew up to be, good human beings, right?
Yeah.
With a sense of empathy, and a sensitivity for what it's like to not have anything, because that's where they came from.
Yeah.
Right. And a respect to the fact that we were fortunate enough to have, more than like people from where they came from.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe we didn't have as much as, some of the kids that came from generational wealth, but, like we had plenty. And it was important for her that we had a respect of that. That we had good manners, that we treated people with respect, right? That we conducted, like we weren't out here acting all crazy whenever we're out of the house, right? That we represented our family in a really good way,
right?
And we respected people. My father, he had ambitions for us for sure.
Yeah.
My father wanted my oldest brother to be a politician, right? He had a lot of charisma. He wanted my older brother to be an athlete because he had a lot of talent in those regards. And my father, for me, like because we spent so much time together in my upbringing, he created a vision for me that I could like do anything I wanted to do with my life. Right? Like that the world was going to be my oyster. He always thought I was very, very smart, very intelligent, and he fed that. Because I remember my mom would even tell me, she was like, you just catch on to things, like, like you pay attention to things, you understand how they work. Right? So my father, both my parents have tried to nurture that as much as possible. But like my old man, he wanted us to take on vocations that were going to, be game changing, not only for the family, but for ourselves, and really get us into the arena of what American culture and success was. I remember my parents used to tell us all the time, it's important to observe your culture and your roots, right? But you're American, like you were born here, right? It's important that you observe those, like that, like what it is to be American, and you understand that. Because that's a luxury that a lot of people in this world wish they had. Right. So like, and in my father specifically, he was like, I'm not telling you abandon, our culture in any way, shape, or form, because there are beauties of our culture that are important, that you have the luxury of being able to carry, that people from this country don't.
Wow.
Right. But what I am telling you is, like don't keep it too real where you don't embrace your current, like the culture that you were born in.
Of course. Yeah. That's beautiful, man. They have a real appreciation and gratitude, given that, where they come from, and what went down historically, they're able to come here and give you that sense of appreciation and pride. Do you feel that's something that's missing for people who were born here? What is it about your upbringing that maybe someone who was born here, third, fourth, fifth generation is missing? Is it just those teachings and that kind of intentionality? It seems like your parents are very intentional in how they raised you and what they instilled in you.
Yeah, very much so. So like fourth, fifth generation, are you talking about like American or like our
American
culture, but fourth, fifth generation?
Yeah.
Like I feel like the culture to be American is different, and like it's a different culture, right? And I feel like when you think about America, the United States of America as a whole, it has a very controversial history. And like it is, but also it's achieved feats that like no other country in the history of the world has in such a very brief time, right? Like the American Empire is like 200 years old, right? But there were various empires in history that were 500 and 600 and 800 years old, right? Like there were, like for what America has accomplished in the very short time that it has been a nation, like again, very, very controversial history about it, but also uncomprehensible, like when you zoom out from a standpoint of like observing history, right? Like it's lightning in a bottle for sure. And so like I feel like for those individuals that might be like fourth, fifth generation American, like that the removal, like there might be some observation of that, but the removal from those things yeah, like America is a consumerist society,
Right.
right? And that is probably one of the, in my opinion, is probably one of the most distracting things from history, right? So I feel like there's an observation and an appreciation, but one of the things about our culture is it's important to observe how we got here,
100%.
right? Where like, traditional American, Anglo-American culture is focused on where they're going, right? And there's a lot of value in that, but I feel like there's there's balance between it, right? And we're just talking about like establish,
right?
First, fourth, and fifth generation American. There are unestablished third, fourth, fifth, and sixth generation American.
Certainly.
Right. People who have had their history erased.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I say. Like, there's a controversial history about American, American culture.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm getting a little too deep here, but like,
no, it's fine.
I feel like here in the next, couple of decades, or maybe in the next few generations, should I say, better said, in the next few generations, the melding of all those things together is what's going to continue to continue to evolve American society. In my opinion. It's not. There's undeniable change that's happening in American society, right? But one thing that Americans of whatever culture like have to really observe is the original history of what America was. Like, this country was founded by immigrants who were escaping religious persecution.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
And better said, like, removing the religious component for a moment and just observing, like it was founded by immigrants who were escaping persecution.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, and it's like, that's in my opinion what it means to be American, right? That's what the Statue of Liberty represents. Give me your tired, give me your poor.
Yeah.
Right. And regardless of what culture you come from or what walk of life you come from, right? What you might feel entitled to from one culture versus another, that should be the fabric that bonds us all together.
Right.
Even as I sit here and I talk about how my parents came to this country from foreign countries.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head when you talked about, like, there are a lot of unestablished families that have been here for generations. Wow. And I feel I come from one of those and that's kind of sort of the inspiration of this podcast, because I didn't have blueprints towards success, right? The only option I was given was join the military or get out. Like, there was no like, oh, you can stay here while you go to school and you work. There's just no other options, although we had been here for a few generations. And so tell me, when you were in, let's say, high school, getting ready to graduate, what was your mindset at the time? And did you go straight into college? What was sort of your game plan at the time, and how did that materialize?
Yeah, so my high school experience was an interesting experience. It was a little unconventional, to say the least.
Okay.
Because again, when I came along after my brothers, my parents were more established, right? So I had access to more resources than my brothers did, by my parents. So I went to a Catholic school from 4th to 8th grade, and then I left that Catholic school, went back into the public school system for 9th and 10th grade in high school at the high school that we were zoned to, and then at a certain point, there was started to become a bit of a divergence in my household between myself and my parents. Where I remember my dad telling my mom, like, I just don't feel like I can reach this guy. Right. Then I ended up in a military academy for my junior and senior year.
Wow.
Right. So yeah. I went to a military academy down in South Texas, Marine Military Academy. And awesome. I was there for my junior and senior year. It was a college preparatory academy.
Okay.
So like the level of rigor there was a little higher.
Certainly.
Right? There was a healthy amount of it was kind of like like early living in my family because there was an emphasis on education, right?
Yeah.
So, like you had to be involved in an activity after school.
Yeah.
Right. There was structure. There was discipline.
Discipline. Yeah.
It was like it was everything I knew all over again, just in a different format.
Yeah.
You know, and like the divergence between my parents and I, it didn't transpire out of like a lack of respect or anything like that. It was more so just out of curiosity. Like I was, and this is like I always kind of knew growing up I was a little ADD, right? And like when all these places are all around me and I can myself think, like I'm like, yeah, I just need to create space for myself so I can just hear myself think.
Right.
You know, so like the divergence between my parents and myself was more so out of curiosity of exploring the world on my own outside of what I had always been told, like this is what needs to be your life.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm grateful. Like there are a lot of people that get out into the world that don't have, you know, the type of environment that I was raised in. Right. So like the world just like it's a challenging place when you're out there by yourself. I'm fortunate enough that my parents instilled, you know, strong values and a certain level of discipline and hard work. That level of expectation when I got out in the world by myself, it's all I really knew. Like, and even though I was lazy at times, I knew I couldn't be as lazy as some of the stuff that I also, because for me, like I just couldn't compute, like, how could you not? Like that's all I've ever known is like get out there and get it, right?
Get it. Yep.
You know, use your mind and your hands. Like get out there and figure out how to put something together.
Yeah.
You know, so when I went into like getting to the root of your question, like when I was a junior and senior in high school, my sense of urgency heightened, and I realized how competitive of a person I was, because I was going to a boarding school, so all male boarding school, with some guys that, like, you know, like when you're that age, you know, and you're competitive, you kind of measure yourself against your peers. And
Absolutely.
I look around and I'm like, I'm twice as smart as this guy, and he is cleaning my clock right now. Like I'm sleeping. Right? Like I gotta. Boy, you better get up and get it. You know. You know, there was a certain level of competitive edge that was bred in me, or that came to life at that point. You know, in a way that it hadn't before, because I was a bit complacent, right? So when I had access to an abundant amount of resources there at school, because it was a college preparatory academy, so there was like a counselor that helped place you into schools, right?
Oh wow!
She was well networked with universities and people in like admissions offices, right? And admittedly, like I didn't even leverage those resources as well as I should have. Because like I'm in this foreign place, like that, with all these resources that like I'm not used to having, but like it's expected that I use, and I don't even know where to start, right? Because for us, you know, it's funny because me and my brothers, we talk about this a lot. It's like we got a lot of the direction, like you need to do this and you need to do that and you need to look into this and you go to school, right? You need to figure out, you know, how to get scholarships, right? But like, we didn't have any of the how. We just had a lot of the what. These are the things you need to do. Don't ask me how to do them. That's your part. You need to get out there and figure that out. Right. So
interesting.
That has a lot to do with, like, you know, we're first generation. Our parents are from foreign countries. Right? They didn't grow up in American institutionalism and structure. Right. So like they don't understand how those resources work, but they know that they're out there. Right. And that we can get our hands on them if we ask questions. So we need to go out there and ask questions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I could definitely relate to that, because, you know, there was a point in time where I'm an adult, I'm in the military, you know, starting off my career, and I didn't know the difference between a community college and a university. I just didn't know. I didn't know the difference between an accredited school and a non-accredited. You know, there were so many things that I had to learn by trial and error, you know, by asking stupid questions that weren't really stupid for me, because just you don't know. You don't have the exposure. And so,
this is what I was getting to earlier. Sorry to interrupt you, but like
no worries.
You mentioned that, and like it triggered this thought where, like, this is what I was getting to earlier about how young the American empire is and how far it's come in such a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
Because in American society, we we talk about the resources that are there, but we don't necessarily provide a framework or a process on how to leverage those.
Yes.
Right. And that, yes, that could be a symptom of like, like those who come from generational wealth that have had access to it, they kind of keep it. Right. Like, and there's a high degree of that, right? Not ignoring that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But also, like, because there's this advancement at such a rapid pace, it's like in business where they're like, hey, when you're in hyper growth mode, a lot of times you don't think about sustainment of that growth. You just keep on getting the sales. Right. And that's kind of how our economy has been. And even for being an economy that way, we're probably one of the most advanced and developed structures in the world from a government standpoint, with still so many gaps. So many gaps.
Sure, certainly.
Right.
So you're in this boarding school, and what did you ultimately do coming out of it?
Yeah. So back to the point of your question. So like I applied for several different schools. I was in between going to school in Florida or going to school in Texas. I ultimately ended up deciding to go to University of Houston. And really it had a lot to do with my middle brother, Nestor, because, he had gone to U of H, but that wasn't the reason why I chose to go there. I remember spring break of my senior year. He was like, hey man, like I went to go see him at his job. And, we grabbed lunch, and he was like, hey, I know you're just trying to decide where you're going to go to school. Like, I just want to let you know, like, if you decide you want to come home, I'm about to buy a house. I know there's nothing glamorous about living with mom and dad while you go to school. So like, you can come and stay with me. And it's like, I won't charge you any rent. But you gotta keep a job, and you gotta be in school. Right. So like that, like the ease of that path is probably what influenced me more than not. And I think about this sometimes, and I wonder what my life would have been if I would have, like, because I applied to University of Miami, I applied to Florida Atlantic, I applied to Florida International. I applied to all these schools in Florida, and the biggest reason why I did was because, like, growing up, we used to make these trips twice a year to Mexico to go visit our family down there. Like, my father's oldest of 12. Like, I got like 30 cousins, man. Wow. Right. So like, we used to make these trips in summer for 2 weeks, as well as in Christmas for Christmas and New Year's. My pops would get a couple weeks off from work. So, like, I spent a lot of my upbringing around my Mexican culture. I didn't spend a lot of my upbringing around my Cuban culture. And that was the closest I was going to get to it in the States. Right. So like, I was very ingrained in this idea of moving to Florida, to go to a really good school, but also to experience the other half of my culture. And ultimately I ended up choosing the path of least resistance and moving in with my brother.
Nothing wrong with that.
Like, it was probably one of the best things that could have happened to me, because like I got to University of Houston, I started school, I was living with my brother, and I remember one night my brother sat me down and he was just like, hey man, so you got like a system or structure for how you tackle your bills and your money? And I go, yeah, like I got it and I pay it. And if I don't have it, then I got to go make some of it so that way I can pay it. Right. And it was just like, all right. And my brother, out of the three of us, he is probably the most frugal guy I know. Right. Like, he is the absolute frugal guy. He does really well for himself. He just doesn't have a lot of extravagant needs because he's an experience-driven person. So like, when it comes to like taking a vacation or something, Nestor's like, I got a budget for that. Like, we're good. It's on me.
Wow.
Right. Like, that's how my brother rolls. But when it comes to, like, we're talking about a guy, the entire time I lived with him for like 2 years, he had the same box for a nightstand. Right. Wow. Like, and sleeping on the same bed that he had when we were living in my parents' house. Like, that's my brother. Wow. So I remember him showing me, he was like, here's how I organize my bills. Like, I have a binder, right? I put my bills in here. I keep track of these things, right? Wow. And even as I got further in college, so he was like, hey, here's like how I track my finances. I got this spreadsheet, right? And he was like, and he would have like finance magazines, like, hey, I read this, like, I was catching up with this Kiplinger magazine most recently. There was a really good article in here. You need to check it out. So I got a lot of that how from my older brother. Because like, we didn't grow up with that.
Yeah.
But like Nestor is the type of guy where like if he needs to know something, he's going to research it. So he taught me a lot of those skills.
Yeah.
Right. Because like Nestor wasn't like the sharpest, like the most brilliant person. Right. But he was a hard worker. Like Nestor would outwork anybody. And that's one of the things I learned from him when I lived with him too. Is like, yo, you can get anywhere you want to go as long as you're willing to work for it, man. 93% of this life is hard work. The other 7% is talent.
Absolutely.
Right. And if you 100%. Like some people are just born with talented capabilities, like, you know, and or they come into them when they hit a certain age. Not everybody does though, but that doesn't mean that you can't have the life that you want. You just got to be willing to work for it.
100%.
Right? He taught me the value of organization. So
love that.
Here I am. I started college. I was going to school for like the better part of 4 semesters because I knew I needed to go to school. No clue what I wanted to study. Burning up tuition, right? Half in, half out, because like I'm out of military school, right? I had been living at this military boarding school for like 2 years.
Yeah.
Right. So like I was in charge of my own destiny in essence.
Yeah.
Right. But then, you know, you get into college and, you know, like the world, the guardrails of life like completely come off, and like you can fall into any pothole, you know, along the way.
Yeah.
You know, so I was very subject to a lot of those things, a lot of the distraction things of college, right? A lot of the I'm cool to skip this class, or like I'm not gonna do that reading.
Yeah.
Right? Like I remember one class I was taking where like it was an hour-long class, and it was like an English literature class, and like I would be kind of like fast asleep sometimes through class, and I would wake up and I would start paying attention to a lot of the discussion and get randomly called on, and I would piece together enough of the information in the discussion to actually like have an opinion, right? And I remember in that moment saying to myself like, all right, I can't keep this up forever. I got to do something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Sorry. It's funny you said that, because my previous guest kind of had a similar experience where, you know, she went straight to college, and it wasn't, you know, initially, you know, she wasn't all in, right? And I was a non-traditional student in that I went straight into the military coming out of high school, got out, then I went to college, and I was like 25 years old at that time. So I was much more intentional, much more responsible and mature. But I think that, you know, from a social standpoint, that also kind of box me in, because like I'm focused. I'm not trying to party. I'm not trying to hang out. Like I'm on a budget, you know, I'm using my savings to get through this, plus my GI Bill. Like I'm limited resources. So I'm trying to be,
like it's do or die.
Yes, do or die. I must be successful. I will be successful. I can't waste my time. I need to have a major in mind and go for it and stick with it. When did you get to that mindset and that state of mind? How long did that take?
Because like I left school. I dropped out of school my 4th semester. Just like stopped going. Like I didn't even drop my classes. I just stopped going. Failed out of all of them because I stopped going. And I remember that semester that it happened. My brother, like his girlfriend at the time, later ended up becoming his wife, got pregnant with his kid. And you know, I was living with my brother. I helped him kind of put a lot of the house together when we moved in, do a lot of stuff. I've always been pretty handy, but like now my brother is like in this spot where he's about to have a kid, and you know, I remember he sat me down one night and was like, hey man, like, you know, I just got this promotion at work, right? Like I'm about to I'll have some more money coming in, but like I can help you find a place, but we're gonna need the space for the baby. And I was just like, say less, man. Like I can figure this out. Like I appreciate it, but I can figure it out. I got it. And I had to find an apartment on my own. I got in a car accident, tore up my car, so now I didn't have wheels, right? And I was working a job that was over by my at the mall, by my brother's house, right? So now I'm catching like 2 buses to get there. That way I can keep that job.
Yeah.
But like that's when things changed for me, because like I had the luxury, like, and even as I talked about my upbringing, I had the luxury of being able to be experimental in a lot of components of my life that many people don't.
Right.
Right. And now the safety net is completely gone.
Yeah.
In the one safety net was removed, and then the rest of it was just swiped from underneath it, just in kind of like this perfect storm that usually happens whenever it's time to grow up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And when it rains, it pours.
Oh yeah.
Right. So like now, like I went from like having to get my own place to like not having a set of wheels. Right. And like having to, but like also I remember going through it and like I had to figure it out. Like I had to scrap that out. I had to scrap it out, man. And like that's where everything became do or die for me.
Yeah.
Right. Like I remember finding myself a job that was closer to my house with these guys. I was selling cell phones. It was when Cricket Wireless had first come to Houston. So like I was helping these guys who were opening their own shop, and I figured out it was really good. Like I've always been really good at selling, but like I figured I was really good at selling stuff at that point, because like I was commission basis at a certain point. So like now I had a way to earn, right? And I like earn. That was one of my things. Like I looked at sales a lot like being an athlete, right? And having grown up as an, in an athletic environment, like it pushed me into a space where things became a lot more do or die. Like it was eat or be eaten, and I wasn't finna get eaten alive.
Right.
So, like I remember being out of school for a year. I'm working in these cell phone stores. I'm making decent money, right? I'm not making terrible money, but I am definitely beneath the poverty line. Right? I was making enough money to pay my bills, to be able to go out on the weekends, right? And I'm like 19, 20 years old. Like I'm a kid, man.
Yeah.
But like when you're an ambitious person, your appetite evolves and it grows, right? And like I got tired of working like 10 hours a day, 6 days a week for like next to nothing of money, right? And using all of my smarts and giving it to these guys who really didn't have any interest in teaching me how to run a business, right? But they had every interest in me running their business for them.
Certainly.
So I went from running one store to running 2 of their stores to running 3 of the 4 stores that they owned.
Wow.
Right. And right around the time, like my best friend was living up in Denton, and he was going to North Texas. Like I went to University of Houston, he went to North Texas. Right. And my best friend, he's a veteran as well. He was in the Army Reserves at that time. And so he would come home like once a month for drill and stuff like that. And he'd be like, hey man, like, you could easily come up there, man, start fresh and like, dive right back into things. And then I remember one time I was just really tired, man. Like I was running pretty heavy, right? Trying to just keep feeding a life that I found that I liked, but not making nearly enough money to keep feeding it. So like I just got tired, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to apply to school and I'm going to jump. I remember I went up there one weekend to check it all out. I really liked it. And I was like, I'm in, I'm gone.
Nice.
Right. So I remember making the decision on my own and then telling my parents after the fact, and my own man was just like, so how you going to do it? I was like, I'm going to take out some student loans. I'm going to get a job. Like I got a job now. I pay my own bills already. Like, right. You guys don't carry me on anything. Like I do all my own stuff already. Yeah. Right. I was like, but I'm finna get it. I'm finna get after it. So my old man was just like, hey, I can help you out with school to start out. Like so that way you can kind of get on your feet. Yeah. I remember the discussion very clearly. He's like, hey, like I can give you some money to get on your feet. And I was like, I know better than to take money from my pocket, man. Like taking money from my house comes with a lot of expectations. Oh yeah. And like stretches way into your life. Right. Like, and so I was just like, yo, all right, check this out, man. If you want to stake me for a couple semesters for school and books, I'm cool with that. I'll figure everything else out on my own. I don't need all that. Wow. I need to figure this out. He respected that. Yeah. So he did. And then I ended up, doing my own thing after that. But that's remarkable because most people would just take the help.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, I did, like, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, I did take the help. Right. But like,
Yeah.
I knew that like I needed to figure out a way to stand on my own at a certain point too.
Right.
But my old man was making an investment in me that he had that he made for my brothers too. Right. Same investment he made for my brothers.
Yeah.
And I remember him telling me, he was like, hey man, just even when like I started a business when I was up there and, I was making really good money and, for telling him like, hey, I can take over this. He was like, just let me do it, man. Like, this is why I worked so hard to provide for you guys. So that way I could be in the game on these really big things.
Yeah.
Right. Like this, like you guys are, I remember my old man telling me, he's like, you guys are my legacy. Like, I need you to let me do this.
Yeah.
Right. So I was like, all right.
That's
Cool.
beautiful. Yeah.
I can do that.
That's beautiful.
So
what was the inspiration behind your business, and how did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, so so I started this beverage distribution startup when I was like a junior in college.
Okay.
And honestly, like I got into it because, some buddies that I knew back home, like I was pretty heavy into hip hop music before I left. And some of the guys that I would go and link up with at this recording studio, one of the guys who actually owned the recording studio, like they were in the beverage distribution business. They were a wholesaler of like a mobile wholesaler, right? So they sold to a bunch of independent convenience stores and gas stations all across the Houston area.
Wow.
And so they came out with this drink, right? It was called Drink, the extreme relaxation beverage. Came in a purple can, 16-ounce can.
Yeah.
And they launched it in Houston, were immensely successful with it.
Wow.
And they were making money hand over fist. And I remember I was home one time and they were like, hey man, we're interested in the Houston in the Dallas market. You think this is something you'd want to do? And I go, I don't know anything about that. And they were like, well, we don't really know anybody up there, but we know you, so like if it's something that you want to figure out how to get down on, like we'll stake you product.
Wow.
So I was just like, yeah, I'm down. Like I understood the trendiness of that at that time.
Yeah.
Right. And I was just like, yeah, I can totally do this. Like I can totally figure this out. So I had never sold beverages. I had never operated in a wholesale sales environment ever. Right. And I'd never done anything B2B, which is called now.
Yeah.
Right. Like anything like that. So I remember I started out with the convenience stores and gas stations around the Denton area, just trying to figure out my rhythm, my flow. Right.
Yeah.
I got my hands on a couple cases. I'm going and talking to these guys at these stores. Right. They're pushing back on me, which is the nature of the business. Right. And like eventually I cracked a couple of them and it sold really well. Right. And they were like, that's too expensive. You got to give me a better price. It's not going to sell at that. I'm like, look, man, the price is the price. It's the price.
Price is the price.
Right?
Yeah.
So
that's so cool.
And like once I kind of figured it out, like I remember they connected with somebody they knew who was a distributor in Dallas through the business, and they got him to take a half a truckload of product on and stake me product up front. So I remember I picked up like my first shipment of cases in my Nissan Sentra. It was like 35 cases. I had this bad boy rolling up I-35 like this. Right? And like I remember I was living in this apartment in Denton, and I was on the 3rd floor, and I'm schlepping these cases up, like, flights of stairs into my apartment. I got like 30 cases of product in like 48 hours. I turned around and I called the wholesaler dude. I was like, hey man, he was like, what's going on? Everything okay? I was like, yeah, I need more product. He goes, you sold all that already? I was like, oh yeah, it's gone, man.
Wow.
Like I need more product. And so he was just like, okay. So like, and I take it back. He had picked up a couple of pallets last time he was in Houston. And, then we were connected together. He was like, hey man, this guy, he's going to help us seed our product. So he picked up a couple pallets to see what I was going to do with it. And when I flipped it around, and he turned around and bought half a truckload, and he was like, how much more you need?
Wow.
Right. So yeah, I was just like, he was like, hey man, you going to keep on doing this in your little Nissan Sentra? And I'm like, I mean, yeah, that's all I got. And he was like, here, I'll lend you my van. He had this Econoline van. I'll never forget this thing. And it was all white. And it was an older model. You could tell it's seen its better days.
Yeah.
And so I load up like a pallet of product in the back of this bad boy, and I'm driving it up to Denton, and the radiator goes out right as I'm getting into Denton.
No.
So I'm on the side of the road. And the radiator went out in this thing, and he's just like, "Where you at?" I tell him, and he's like, "You got a way to get the product out of there?" It's like, "Yeah, I'm not that far from the house, man. Like, I can make a couple of runs between here and there and get it up to my apartment." He was like, "All right, cool."
Yeah.
Just, he was like, "Once you get it all done, right?" He's like, "Stash the key in this spot. I'll have one of my guys come and pick it up, and I'll get it fixed."
Yeah.
Right. So like I started moving that stuff, and then like slowly but surely started branching out in the rest of the Metroplex. And then these other guys that I knew from back home, they had come up. Like once I kind of caught some momentum, they had come up and helped me launch the rest of the market to really start getting it on and popping.
It's incredible.
So, like I got the idea, to answer your question. I got the idea from some buddies that I knew back home.
Yeah.
And I was waiting tables at the time. So I was just like, yeah, like I was studying, like the degree class that I chose was entrepreneurship at North Texas.
Okay.
Right. So like in my mind, I had in my mind that in the course of my college experience, I was going to start a business. It was just a question as to what. So when this came about, I was like, no time like the present. Let's go. Right. Wow. So
what did you learn about yourself in that process? And what did you learn about entrepreneurship?
A lot. I learned how to like read people. I learned that as organized as I thought I was still terribly unorganized to run a business. I learned out how much of a hustler I was. And I learned that I was willing to get up at whatever hour and go to sleep at whatever hour in order to be successful. Like I was determined. And then lastly, I learned what kind of salesperson I was. Because there's a myriad of different salespeople.
Yeah.
Right. The salespeople are like athletes, man. Like we got chips on our shoulder too, depending on how good we are. Right. And yeah, like I figured out what kind of salesperson I was. There are certain salespeople that can just sell anything, right? They will sell somebody the dream. I figured out that I could only sell stuff that I really believed in.
100%.
Right. And I also felt that my ability to make sales was all predicated on my ability to sell myself.
Right.
Right. Not so much the product.
Right.
Right. And in order for me to really become successful, it's like I had to become the product. Like the identity of the product and myself had to become one. Right. Product, service, whatever it was. Because for me, it wasn't just about what the beverage that I was selling, because in the beverage industry, when you're in an operationally intense environment where you're handling distribution, you don't just sell one product. You sell as many things as you possibly can to be able to cover the cost of that and then, make some money. Right. I just happened to be selling a product that had a high attraction and happened to be pretty profitable, because it was a brand new category. Yeah. Right. So it didn't really have any competitors out there. So it was kind of in the league of it. And in beverage, like if you know beverage, like you have high volume movement, low profitability products, and then you have high profitability, low volume movement products. This was high profitability and high volume movement product. Wow. Right? So it was kind of like one of those like
a unicorn
type products where you can make some really good money. Yep. Right. And like also learn a business. So, like I was handling business like super primitively. Like I was handling like all cash and check and money order transactions. Like I remember at one point I had like a shoebox full of cash in my closet. Right. And then I finally went and opened a bank account.
Nice.
Right. Yeah, like I was a kid, man. I was a kid. And like the larger that I wanted to get, the more organized I had to be.
Sure.
And I probably would have stayed in that business because it had so much. It wasn't a complex business. It was just an operational environment, right? Yeah. I probably would have stayed in that business had it not been for the economic recession in 2008, 2009. In Texas, Texas was really affected in 2009, where just like consumption of so many things just really came to a screeching halt. Yeah. And there were customers that I had developed really solid relationships with. I'll never forget a conversation I had with a guy who ran a Chevron station off of Roof Snow in 820 in Fort Worth, North Richland Hills. Yeah. Right. And really nice guy. But I remember like I was getting a little disillusioned just because like I was trying, like I was like hot, right? I was selling all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like, it's just coming to a screeching halt, right? So I remember I went in the store. He's like, Karl, he's like, it's not that I don't like your product or don't want to sell it. Like, I want to sell it. He goes, but people aren't buying things right now. And he walked me into the cooler and the cold vaults, and he's just like, look at this cooler. He goes, we usually fill this cooler once in the morning, once at midday, and once in the evening, right? He's like, it's 3:00 today, and I haven't filled it since yesterday evening. And I was just like, he's like, people are buying gas and leaving. If they come in the store, they're picking up cigarettes and they're leaving.
Wow.
Right? It's like, it is tough out here right now. Right. So like, I diversified into other drinks, right? Like I picked up Dublin Dr. Pepper, right? So that was like the Dr. Pepper with imperial sugar in it. So I picked it up in like the 8-ounce glass bottles, the 12-ounce cans, 20-ounce bottles. I was selling that in.
Yeah.
I lost Calypso lemonade in the market, selling those. Again, it was all convenience and gas station driven stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
What advice would you give someone who's looking to start into a business or going into an industry, given you've had that exposure, and then obviously the tough, recession that we had, maybe someone out there is going through a tough time with their business. What advice would you give?
Resiliency isn't just a buzzword. It is like a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right. Like when you're an entrepreneur, you're a scrapper. Yeah. Right. Like entrepreneur is defined as willing to do what it takes to be successful. Right. In my opinion. So like you can't be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
Right. You can't be afraid to fail. You need to be resilient, right? And you have to be open to learning things that are outside of your comfort zone, right? Like things that maybe you didn't think you needed to do or would want to have to do, but like the evolution of your environment, market conditions, industry, etc. Like you have to be willing to embrace those things and pivot. Like the pivot is so real. Like it is probably fundamentally, like as I staff today in my current role, that's the one thing whenever we're looking for frontline employees, like we're trying to gauge what their pivot capability is throughout the course of the interview process, because like nothing ever goes according to plan. Like plans are great to wrap your mind around the direction that you want to go, but you have to keep your mind open to variable change and be willing to pivot. You have to let go of your pride. That's the one thing that most entrepreneurs have, man. They have a lot of pride in themselves and what they're doing, like whether it's they're selling a service, a product, whatever it is. Right? There's a lot of pride in it because it takes like a certain level of personal investment to want to jump out there on your own and start something. Right. But like you have to be willing to let go of your pride to be able to continue moving that forward, right? Or be comfortable like saying, hey, this is not going to work out, right? And being okay with that. I had the privilege, and like I didn't even really know how like big this guy was going to be in, like in our generation at the time, but I had the privilege of meeting, you ever heard of a guy, his name is Alexis Ohanian?
I have not, no.
So he was one of the founding guys of Twitter and also a Reddit, really big tech guy. He's married to Serena Williams.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I met him at a fireside chat in 2012 at South by Southwest. Right. I went there with work. I was working for PepsiCo and IT at the time. And, they hosted him at a fireside chat.
Wow.
Right. And I had the luxury of just sitting next to this guy and just chopping it up with him. And, like he is an entrepreneur, and like I didn't know who Alexis Ohanian was at the time, but like everybody else at that conference was like, yo, this is the dude. Yeah. Right. So I'm just talking to him like a regular guy, and I remember he was just like, hey man, like you can't be afraid to fail. Right. Like so many people, he goes, regardless of his tech, whatever you choose to do, like so many people get so caught up in this idea of perfection and putting together a perfect product that they 100%. Get so subconscious about like releasing it before they feel it's ready. And that's like the biggest fallacy that you could. Sometimes you just got to throw it out there and see
Yeah.
what happens with it and collect that information so that way you know how to keep on rolling with it.
Yeah.
You can't be afraid to fail. Failure is the key to success.
100%.
Like you will fail 1,000 times before you succeed. It is how it works.
Yeah.
Right. And I've never forgotten about that, because that's how I would tell anybody starting a business, regardless of what you're doing. It's like, hey man, be comfortable failing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, be comfortable, you know, like find comfort in discomfort, you know, expect to fall a myriad of times, because those are the times that are going to really test you and ask you, how bad do you want it? And what are you willing to do for it?
Gotcha. That's great, man. So you obviously graduated from college, and then obviously the 2008 financial crisis went down. How did you pivot from that? And what did you ultimately do following college? What was sort of your path from there?
Yeah. So like I ended up having to close my business because of the crisis. And mind you, I was in college at the time too, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I remember in like 2008, like I was this kid who was like sitting on a mountain of cash in college, right?
Wow.
Like self-made.
Yeah. Dangerous.
You know, like yeah. Like I would think it was incredibly dangerous. You know, like I ended up having to close this business because like or stop operating in that business, just because like I couldn't. Like it was at a certain point. I remember it was fall semester of 2009, and I go to my dad and I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about taking like going to school part-time this semester. And he's just like, no, absolutely not. Like, you can't do that. You shouldn't do that. Don't do it. And like my old man's already triggered because I had left college at one point in juncture. And like I mentioned earlier in this discussion, like education was so important to my pops.
Certainly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I remember telling him, I was like, hey man, like, hear me out. I started this business. I've been very passionate. I've been very successful with it. I've learned so much in the course of it. I owe it to myself to see this thing out this semester, like these next 6 months, to see if I can get my business running in the direction that it was before. Yeah. Right. So that way I can, you know, like jump back into school full time. Like I need to, like, I'm going to have to slim down my operation and get back into the fray, you know, myself. So like I owe it to myself to try this. Yeah. He goes, well, what happens when it doesn't work out? And I'm like, I'll shut down the business. I'll move on. Like I'll go back to waiting tables and I'll finish school. Like that's what I came up here for anyways. Yeah. And I remember us going down to Mexico that Christmas, and my old man's like, what are you gonna do? And I'm like, I gotta shut it down, man. Like I wasn't able to accomplish what I needed to accomplish. Like it's time. And it's just like, are you back at school full time next semester? I was like, yep. Like, what are you gonna do for money? And I go, I'm gonna go back to waiting tables, same place that I was at before. So I did. I went back to waiting tables at Red Lobster. I finished out school. I was very emotionally attached to my business because it tested me personally a lot.
And you grew with it.
I had to. Yeah. I did. And I made some like I was a kid. I made terrible decisions with money at that time too, because I had a bunch of it rolling in. And you know, so like I spent a lot of that time reflecting on that as I was waiting tables. Yeah.
Tell me what a lot of younger folks sometimes, you know, come into money, you know, early on. What would you tell someone who's coming into money, you know, at a fast rate like you were, at a young age? You know, what like personal finance advice would you give them in terms of managing that money and from, you know, the decision-making standpoint?
Yeah. So my biggest advice to a young person that comes into a bunch of money is organize your money, right? Like understand the inflows and the outflows of how you spend, right? Whether it's bills, it's like, you know, like understand yourself and how you work money, right? Like some people are frivolous, right? Some people are impulsive, right? Be honest with yourself on those things and create a structure for your money where that way you can see the different usages of your money. Like I spread out a bunch of different accounts. Once I figured that out about myself, like, cause I'm a very in the moment type of person, but I'm also a very accountable person. And one of the things about me is like, I will not sacrifice my bill money for a good time, right? So the easiest way to make sure that I never put myself in that position is to just take my money from my bills as it comes in and just put it over
aside
into a spot where I'm not going to touch it.
Yeah.
Right. So like, organize your money so much so where you have it in different places for different reasons, especially like if you're a visual person or you have different aspirations and ways or ideas and ways to use your money, because the big buzzword in our society is like, I want my money to make money, right? We shouldn't say the biggest buzzword, but the biggest philosophy is like, I want my money to make money for me, right? Cool. So like, organize your money into different buckets where you can see those things.
Yep.
Right. Because seeing it is way different than just knowing that, okay, it's there. I mean, like, it's coming in, so it's gotta be there until you swipe and the card gets declined. Right. So like, before you start trying to like make your money make money for you, the first thing you can do is organize your money into different spaces. Like, all right, cool, I got my bills money over here, right? And I don't only put just the money I need to pay my bills. I put a little bit more than that in there, so that way I build up a safety net fund little by little 100%. Every month that goes by, right? Like I got an account over here that's my savings, right? And just the money purely that I want to go into savings goes in there, right? I don't plan on touching it. Not how I pay any of my bills. It's just money that I stack up, right? If I want to go on trips, right, I got an account over here that every time I got money that comes in, a percentage of it goes into there. I call it the vacation fund, right? That way, if I see a trip that I want to go on, I don't have to worry about coming up with the money. Like, it's just there, right? I don't touch it. I don't do nothing with it, right? Give yourself an allowance of money that you use to spend and survive from, it may be paycheck to paycheck, right? It'd be like inflow to inflow, whatever the case is. From the moment that you receive money to the next moment that you receive money, take a portion of that money and give yourself a certain amount of money to have, like whether you use that to pay gas, buy groceries, buy yourself clothes, go out with your friends, right? Whatever the case might be, it all comes out of that, right? And stay disciplined enough. Like, think of it as a game, right? Where it's just like, how much of it can I keep?
Right. Yeah.
Like, and then build up a nest egg from there. And then like, if you want to start investing, take some money and put it into an account where it's just like, hey, like I want to invest in this, and go find somebody who operates in money for a profession, and be honest about where your money is now that it's organized. So that way that person can help you build wealth.
Yeah.
Right. Like, if you have the time, like I'm not a wealth manager. I know money, right? Like I've always known how to work my money. My brother helped me figure that out a lot. Right. But I'm not a wealth manager, right? There are people who dedicate their professions to that. There's nothing wrong with going with one of those people and, like, and talking to them about what your financial situation is.
Yeah. So just have a conversation.
Like, and for the love of God, if you come into a big lump sum of money, focus on paying off your debt first before you start trying to make your money make money, right? Because debt compounds in interest every day. And some debts every single day, some debts every single month, some debts biannually. Like, understand how that works. Right. And pay that stuff off. Like, having some debt is good because it helps build credit. Right. But like, not so much so where it consumes your cash flow. Right.
It's great advice.
So like, just be smart. Like understand how money works. Organize it, right? And pay off the things that you owe before you start trying to put your money to work.
100%. Great advice. So you've spent many years in the workforce. You were an entrepreneur before you went into, the workforce. How did that prepare you? What are the differences? And then how did your experience as an entrepreneur prepare you for the actual, big companies that you've worked for?
So my time as an entrepreneur prepared me from a standpoint of like a high sense of urgency and like intention, especially when you fail at it. Like, when you jump back into something, you have just a higher degree of attention to detail, because like there's almost like a certain fear of failure. There's just like, I can't go through that again, man. Like I got to be better this time, So
Yeah.
like I had a stronger sense of urgency. I had a stronger sense of determination because I wanted to find the success. Like I got the opportunity to touch a really cool lifestyle. I wanted to figure out how to sustain that lifestyle,
Yeah.
right? And started out with my sense of determination and urgency.
Yeah.
Right. Also, like I had somebody articulate this for me when I was first starting my career, and it's something I've never forgotten. And as I talk to some young guys that are starting their career, I pass on this nugget of knowledge. Yeah. Where it's like a lot of people think that like their career is like shaped like a pyramid, right? You start at the bottom and you slowly work your way to the top.
Yeah.
And a guy told me, he was like, it's not like that. It's shaped like a diamond, right? Like you start here at the bottom, and in the beginning of your career, the first 10 years, you're like filling up your career with experiences. You're trying to figure out what you're really good at, what you like to do, what you don't like to do, try different stuff out. And then you hit this certain point in your career where you're just like, all right, I'm good at this stuff. I don't like working with that. I'm really cold at this, right? Like now I need to start narrowing down into where I want to be. So that way I can really, really just like excel.
Yeah.
Right. And that was probably like I studied entrepreneurship in college. I found my way into an IT job right out of college because like Pepsico, they only hired for supply chain or IT. Right. And they were really specific about supply chain majors. Right. So like I found my way into an IT job because of the experience that I had in beverage distribution and the interview that I had. The lady just really liked me. She ended up calling me back for an opportunity. Wow. And so I started in this technical environment with no technical background, but a lot of grit and determination that lady sensed in me. She was like, you can learn some things.
Yeah.
Like, and we need people like you in our organization.
Yeah.
So she brought me in as a metrics analyst. So my job was to understand reporting for the project that I was part of and build reporting to measure progress throughout that project. Right. And then that, like I networked, and that ended up bringing me into a full-time job because I graduated in the course of my internship over the summer. So they ended up keeping me full-time as a metrics analyst, measuring mean time to resolution and mean time to response for tickets that were coming through the help desk.
Wow.
Right. So
yeah,
a lot of the reports that I generated on a period basis for senior leaders were how they made decisions on how they were going to afford resources and stuff like that. So my game had to be A1. Right. And like, I was also getting tasked with executing reporting on another level that I had never done before. So I had to be, but like they were willing to teach me and afford me the training resources that I needed. And they paired me with a guy who was an expert in the organization on building that stuff.
Wow.
So I had to build a relationship with this man and get him to want to teach me. Because I don't know if you know a lot about IT people, man, but like there are some very warm IT people, and then there are other people who are not warm.
Oh yeah.
You know, and my man was he was a cool cat. He was a cool cat, but like he wasn't a cool cat to everybody.
Sure.
Right. So like I just had to figure out how Mike worked, and you know, he really liked me. He liked my energy. You know, he liked my excitement for being in this new workplace. And he was like, he definitely had this attitude with me. He was like, all right, settle down, sit down, man. Let's teach you some stuff. You know.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, we're gonna show you how this thing works.
Yeah. And I really think your experience, you know, as an entrepreneur, building relationships with your clients, right, that helped, you know, you were able to segue those skills, right, into a completely different industry, you know, working for a global company like PepsiCo, you know, and still like leverage, you know, what you've learned. So that's very valuable. What were your takeaways from learning, from working for a major company like PepsiCo? Were you nervous going in? Was that sort of your North Star? And once you got there, did that change? What was sort of the scenario that ended up playing out?
So getting a job at a major corporation was like a really cool thing because like again, I had come from this environment where like I was scrapping it out on my own. I was waiting tables and I was trying to find my way back to, you know, a version of success for myself. And now I'm in this corporate environment where like the world is just open to me. Right. And I'm figuring out about the opportunities that are afforded to, you know, a professional once you're in the professional arena. And I really like, it was inspiring, you know, for me, you know, but like also in the same token, like I had like this new level of grit and determination and like attention to what I was doing and sense of urgency where like, well, now that I was there, there was only one direction for me, and that was onward and upward.
Yeah.
So like the one thing I can say I really learned from PepsiCo was like professionalism on a global scale. Right. And when I say global scale, I mean it in every sense of the way. Yes, global from a world standpoint, but also global from like a business standpoint, like a level of professionalism that is a universal professionalism, regardless of what company you work for.
Yeah.
Right. I learned that. I learned email etiquette. I learned meeting etiquette. I learned happy hour etiquette. Right. I learned all these things that like you never, like when you're in college and you think about getting a job, you're just thinking about doing a gig, making money, and going home.
Yeah.
Right. But you don't think about the maintenance of those things, right? And the little things that you have to do in order to position yourself for the next opportunity, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And one of the things that I learned during my time in the IT department there was like how important it was to be collaborative and open to new experiences, because those new experiences were going to be the things that afforded you, greater opportunities. And then also like keeping a positive energy, even when it's not probably something to be glamorous and excited about.
Yeah.
Like from my standpoint, and again, like rewinding to the discussion we had about upbringing and how I wielded that upbringing, and like the history of my parents, right, and their families, like really understanding that was a privilege to be there and taking that privilege serious.
Yes.
Right. Like I remember my pops telling me once I got out of college and I got into a gig, he was like, "Hey man, it's time to play for keeps. I know you play for keeps, but like you're in it." Yeah. Right. Like you are in the belly of the beast now. Right. You work for a multinational company, like a global company that operates business in almost every country of the world.
Yes.
Right. Like he goes, button up your shirt straight and remember where you come from.
Wow.
Right. Don't have us out here looking a fool. Remember, you represent us all.
When you got that job, how did your parents feel? They must have been ecstatic for you.
My old man was excited, but he's also this kind of guy where he's like, "That's great, keep going."
But keep going, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom, she's always been immensely proud.
Yeah.
My mom, she's always been immensely proud and always like, that motherly shock and awe where she's like, I made you. Like,
wow, yeah.
Yeah. Like my old man, he's always like, don't be complacent. Like this is just the beginning.
That's
like,
right.
Great job. Keep going.
Wow.
Right. Like this isn't the end for you.
Right.
There's a whole lot more to go get, and you need to wake up every day like the Rents do. Right. Play for keeps.
Yes.
Right. We don't play for fun. We play for keeps out here.
Yeah.
So like
I love
that dog mentality.
Yeah. I love that. I feel like we should have your parents up here. They were so great, man. I feel like, everyone could use parents like that, I really admire, that they support you, but they still keep pushing you. There's no room for complacency or, getting comfortable. It's like, no, you're great, but keep going, So love that.
Yeah, I think a very big measuring stick for me, even in times like, after I left that IT job, I moved into the field. I went back into beverage selling for Pepsi. I moved out to the Midwest, right? And I remember I got dropped in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the winter. Like never lived in rural America in my life outside of being at military school for 2 years, but I was on a base, I remember being there and going through like I remember again another perfect storm in my life where just the myriad of things that just weren't exactly going to plan.
Yeah.
And really doubting myself, doubting my capability.
Really?
Not really knowing like if I'd made the right choice, because it was challenging on a scale that was testing my resolve.
Yeah.
right? It wasn't testing my capability or my level of intelligence. It was testing my resolve, right? My ability to keep getting back up when I got knocked down, you know, and that is a whole different test, man. That's a test of durability,
Right.
That's not a test of intelligence. That's not a test of desire. Well, yeah, I guess it is a bit of a test of desire, but it's a test of durability, man.
Yeah.
Like how many hits can you take? And again, how bad do you want it? And what are you willing to do for? What sacrifices are you willing to make? You know, I remember being out there and, you know, thinking to myself various times, like, yo, if my folks went through what they went through in their lives, and to get to where they're at right now, like this should be a cakewalk for me. Like, yeah. I'd get back up, keep going.
Yeah.
Right. And there were breaking points that I had where I was ready to just throw in a towel, but you know, and then people come into your life at the right time, like to check in on you, right? Maybe you haven't talked to them in months, but they call you at the right time, or they shoot you that message at the right time, and it's exactly what you need. Remind you to get back in the game.
Yeah.
You know,
so when I joined the Air Force, I got stationed out in the Midwest. So I was in Dayton, Ohio for 6 years. And it's you know, it's no walk in the park in terms of you know, not having a support system, right? It's kind of quiet, you know, around that area. And so it's not much going on. So for you to be struggling at work on, you know, on top of the, you know, just the lack of I guess stimulation outside of work, you know, there's no family, there's not much going on to distract you, you know, it's kind of like all work, you know, out there.
It really was too. Like but I knew that going there,
into
like I knew that, you know, like the entire reason I went out there was like going into training mode. Right?
Yeah.
Like I was going out there looking for something, and it wasn't work related, it was personal. But like I was going out there looking for me, and you know, like I had plenty of time to sit with myself.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember there were countless nights where I look at myself in the mirror and see who I was. Like there was a level of honesty when you don't have anybody around you to give you some sort of level of familiarity or distraction.
Right.
Where you just you look at yourself and you're just like, this is who I am. Like, this is the person that I am. What do you love? What do you like? What don't you like? What don't you love? You know, and like what kind of person do you want to be? Right. And then also like knowing that this is how I am, like how do I work with what I have?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To find the things that I want out of my life.
Yeah. It sounds like you learned more about yourself out there, and you know, you going through that situation and brought out things that, you know, a lot more introspection and, you know, attention to your, you know, yourself and your mind and what's going on in there. What was sort of how did you cope?
Oh man. I coped with work a lot. I worked a lot. I made a couple of buddies through work. I made one lifelong friend who actually happened to be my boss at the time.
Wow.
But he was out there from like he had moved. We moved to Iowa. Like we were living in Iowa, rural Iowa, Waterloo, Iowa to be exact. And he had moved out there from Kansas City. I had moved out there from Dallas. I got there almost a year after he did. Right. So he was in a foreign place, not knowing anybody. We didn't really connect too much at first because, you know, there is the supervisor employee relationship and level of respect that you need to have. Yeah. But, you know, like once we got, like, him and I built a very deep connection, like just like a bond, you know, through the level of success that we were both trying to find and the things that we were trying to learn about ourselves out there. You know, Mike's like 3 years older than me, you know, so he wasn't like very much older than me at all. And, you know, we took that opportunity. Like it was the first location he had ever run. It was the first time I had ever been, you know, that far away from home. And like the stakes were both high for both of us, and we bonded in that. So like I went from like not knowing anybody to like finding a brother out in the middle of nowhere that I never knew I was gonna meet, right? And then like went from that to like spending almost every single day I lived out there with that person, whether we were at work or out of work.
Wow.
Right? Because there was a level of respect that we had for each other, for our business, and for the success that we were trying to find that bonded us together.
That's beautiful.
Right. And there was a certain peace that I found in myself. I remember I flew my mom out for her birthday in October of 14. Right. And this was probably, I moved to Chicago in January of 15, but October of 14, I flew my mom out, and this was the first time she had met him, as well as a couple of other people, a couple other friends that I made out there. I remember my mom told me, like, you have this peace about you out here, like you found yourself.
Wow.
You know, and I was like, yeah, like I'm in a great space. Like my mom even talks to me about that even to this day. Like last time I was home, we were talking about that experience out there. You know, and you know, like I'd found a certain peace with myself that like I didn't have, like a tranquility that I had that I hadn't had before that. Right. Like it was always like I've always been impatient with myself and trying to succeed and achieve, and you know, but that sense of urgency that I was talking about.
Right. It's always like go, 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 and what's next? What's the next thing? And it's like, what was it about that time in your life that helped you to achieve that peace and tranquility? Was it just you just accepting it and working through it, you know, day by day? What was sort of the catalyst for that tranquility?
Yeah, I embraced the environment that I was in. Right. I mean, there wasn't anything glamorous about Waterloo, Iowa, or Sioux Falls, Iowa, right? Like, it's just like infrastructurally or, you know, anything like that. Like, it's small, like collectively, like 150,000 people between the two towns. Right? Like, there wasn't anything glamorous about it. But I like accepted I embraced the experience of it. Right. I found a way to live the moment, and I found like a part of myself that I was searching for. Right. Like I found a part of myself. Like I saw this capability come to life. Right. And an ability to think through things in a new way that, you know, maybe before I never gave myself the chance to do. Right. What I mean by that is like, it was like a level of patience with myself that I found that like I was now more willing to, you know, like listen to me more, right? Instead of letting my environment dictate the pace that I needed to move at, I could hear myself more and like really understand how to leverage these newfound capabilities that I had to find the success that I was looking for, to be the man that I wanted to be.
Right. You know, is that something that comes with age, or maturity, or just the environment, or a combination? Because, you know, a lot of people struggle with finding that peace, you know?
Yep. And that, like, my biggest learning out of that experience too is like, that's not a destination, right? That is something that like, you don't just get there and cool, I made it. I'm good for life, right? Once you get there, there's a certain degree of maintenance that it takes to like maintain that. Right. And, you know, like it was time. It was honesty with myself. It was the environment that I was in, right? The simplicity of the environment that I was in that gave me the opportunity to just sit with myself more, right? Instead of having to like I was like, I had a strong sense of urgency when it came down to get to tackling the things that needed to be tackled.
Absolutely.
Right. And an unwillingness to settle for anything less than I knew was possible.
Yeah.
Right. You know, so like a certain degree of resiliency that I had to apply. But when I found myself out of those moments, I would sit with myself and just really like just enjoy the space, right? Enjoy the peace, enjoy the stage of life that I was in. Yeah. Because I had the opportunity to do that. Like after my time there, I moved to Chicago, and you know, I moved out there for work, and that was a completely different experience.
Yeah. Big city.
It was a big city. You know, the working environment that I was in was a very competitive working environment. It was a high stakes working environment because the organization had made a very lofty investment into the business there. It was like a $10-15 million investment that they had made into the business there.
Wow.
Right. We were tackling, like, we were a testing ground for how they were going to evolve the operation in various different major cities across the country.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a very competitive environment. And they were like that peace and that resolve that I had found was immensely tested within the first couple of weeks. Right. And like, I feel like when you're in that kind of competitive environment, like a dog eat dog kind of competitive environment, and like the culture is bred that way, like that stuff starts with leadership, man.
Yeah.
Right. It really does. Right. And like when the leadership kind of really pushes the agenda that way, you have to make a decision, you know, in yourself on like, hey, are you cool with that? Are you not cool with that? Are you going to be flexible and evolve your skill and your style and, you know, your resolve, you know, to really meet the needs of your environment? You know, or are you going to dig your heels in the sand? Like, are you going to go with the flow, or are you going to be the unstoppable force of the immovable object? Right. And, you know, like I'm a firm believer that when you quote unquote get backed up into a wall, you either fold like a lawn chair, man, or you come out swinging. Right. And I'm definitely a very, very much a come out swinging type of guy. Because, you know, like if I've made the sacrifices to get as far as I've gotten, right, and at the core of it, what's happening is I'm getting pushed out of my comfort zone, right? Then this is an opportunity for me to learn and evolve, right? As long as the challenges are ethical, of course. If they become unethical, that's a completely different story. But I wasn't in an unethical situation. I was just in a highly competitive environment. Right. So it forced me to get deeper with my hustle, with my work ethic, with my level of capability. It taught me new things. Like I became very analytical about our business, like an understanding what was driving the business, where the opportunities were to go get upside, right? How to lead my team. My leadership capability was really tested there. Very much tested. It tested my resolve a lot. And then here I am again, back in a space where my resolve is being tested, but just in a different way, in a way that I didn't expect. And at that point, you ask yourself, like, okay, are you willing to, like, are you going to be willing to evolve, or are you going to be stubborn?
Right. I think it's really key to point out that, you know, when you say you became more analytical with your business, you know, you had that IT role, you know, previous to that helped prepare you, but you didn't foresee that coming, but it did, right? And again, that speaks to, you know, kind of life being sort of a zigzag, right? It's like you don't always see what's to come, but, you know, your previous experiences kind of help you in you know, leveraging the skills and the exposure to be successful moving forward. And so I think that's really cool that you know, it kind of came full circle in that way.
It did. Like I had to go to a level of depth of analytics of our business that like was necessary to be able to succeed in that environment, right? Like you had, like when you thought you drilled deeper, you need to go all the way down to the base level, right, and rebuild back up from there, right? But like that capability that I gained there when I took another role and moved back down to Dallas, like I stepped into that role with that heightened level of capability, and what took me 9 to 10 months to accomplish in Chicago, I did it in 3 in Dallas. Yeah, so like I was sharper, I was faster, my leadership capability was higher, my IQ on working with people was significantly more evolved, right? Like I was a force for sure. And one thing that Chicago taught me was like how resilient I am, right? Like it definitely woke up a dog in me for sure, you know, and it made like I thought I was a hustler before I got there. I was on a whole nother scale when I left.
Wow. Talk to me a little bit about leadership, because you've led people, you've hired and fired. What in your mind makes a good leader?
A lot of different things. I think there's a big confusion out there about management versus leadership, in corporate America specifically. Because you're a manager doesn't necessarily mean that you're a leader, right? And because you're a leader doesn't necessarily mean that you're in a position to manage.
Yeah.
Right. And during my time in Chicago, I actually really fundamentally learned the difference between the two just based on the experiences that I was having.
Yeah.
Right. Like, managers can be really great at managing priorities, but terrible at leading people.
Yeah.
Right. Leaders can be really, really great at leading people, but it doesn't necessarily they know how to manage business.
Right.
Right. And there's a fundamental difference between the two. I think managers manage priorities and leaders lead people.
Yeah.
Or let me rephrase that. I feel like managers manage people and lead priorities. I feel like leaders lead people and manage priorities.
I see that. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. And like, one of the things that makes a person, or like in my experience, one of the things that's made me a really great leader is understanding, like, fundamentally understanding my players on the field, right? What their capabilities are. And once you understand what their capabilities are, asking yourself if you position them in the best place to make the best contributions to the team. I've always known from very early on that your ability as a leader to win championships, right? To be successful is predicated on having a team with a very diverse skill set, right? If you're trying to staff a team of people who are exactly like you, you're not going to be able to tackle all the challenges that come, in an environment, right? And that's whether you play a sport or you work in business.
Yeah.
Right. So having people on the team that have diverse capabilities allow, like, if you really, really lean into your people, it enables you and your team to really leverage each other's strengths to move the whole team forward, to achieve things that probably haven't been achieved before, right? Because you tap into those strengths and those capabilities.
And I think it's important to point out that, again, like, your previous experience in building that high EQ, emotional intelligence, that enabled you to be a more effective leader and to really understand your people, their motivations, how they tick, right? To be able to position them to succeed, I think that's a very, again, your skill set's coming full circle, that's really cool.
Yeah. Like, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, continue, please.
I was going to say, leadership is a privilege for sure. Because, like, when you think about a day, like a 24-hour day, right? As human beings, we spend the most amount of our day at work. Yeah. Right? Like, post the collegiate experience, right? The educational environment, like, when you get out into the world, right? You wake up in the morning, you prep for your day, you work anywhere from 8 to 10 hours, some people 12 hours, right? Yep. You come home, you decompress, maybe you got a family, you're engaged with your kids, right? You make some time for your significant other. Maybe you don't have any kids, but you make some time for your significant other or your family, your parents or your siblings or whatever the case might be, people that you care about, right? Yes, and then you go to sleep and you do it all over again. Yes, sir. Right? But a chunk of that time is spent at work. And if you don't like what you do, you will be miserable, right? Like, 100%. As a leader, having that awareness to know that behind every person that you might be leading is their own life. Yep. Like, and like, keeping it top of mind that, like, hey, behind you, there's a myriad of other different challenges, smiles and cries and laughters and challenges that are happening, right? And having the empathy to be able to keep that top of mind as you make decisions, that are going to impact your team and how you position them to succeed. Nobody goes into work not wanting to be successful, Like,
Very
think
true.
about how much time you spend at work. Like, nobody goes into work just like expecting to be unsuccessful.
Yeah.
Right. So like, as a leader, it's my responsibility to position my team in a space to find the success that they're looking for.
Love that.
It's something that managers don't really dive into really well, but they should, because that's the only thing keeping them from being a really, really great leader.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've had experiences like that where they're very good at, like, tracking metrics and, giving updates to the project and, reporting up, to executive leadership.
Mm-hmm.
But, in terms of the growth and development of their people, the EQ side of leadership, and that's sometimes a thing that's lacking in corporate America. But love that you've been able to get that kind of leadership experience and exposure, and you've been able to apply so much of what you've learned and cultivated over the years. Can you talk, as we close out, can you talk a little bit about the volunteer work that you've done, for children in the community? Because I think that's a big part of leadership is giving back, right? Your own time, your own resources in some instances. So could you kind of give me a little overview of some of the work you've done?
Yeah. I think volunteerism is probably been a pretty big fabric of me, since I was a lot younger. Just my mother was a really big volunteer-driven person, whether it was at church or how she committed her time. So like when I was in college, in my fraternity, we used to volunteer at this place called Camp Summit. And it was a camp that was for people with different abilities, like special needs. Mm-hmm. We would go out there for like an entire weekend, and they just focus on creating a really positive experience for the weekend, because like they were breaking away from their families, right? Who, like, their lives are centered around the well-being of their child, right? So like we would volunteer for an entire weekend and do it all, like everything, like attend to all the needs that they have. Right. Stuff like that. When I was in Iowa, I volunteered for junior achievement, right? And I was teaching kids that were ninth graders in high school. And I chose ninth grade. I had done it previously when I was working in the IT side of the house at Pepsico, and I had worked with elementary school kids, but like I liked high school more because I felt like there was like a more relative, like closer age gap with, some adolescents that like are trying to figure out what their next moves are going to be in life, and like knowing what my mind was like at that time, having somebody that I could relate to, how important that was. So I would go in the mornings like once a week. And I was supposed to teach a class that was centered, like it had different things, right? Like it had like an economical component of it. It had like a professionalism component of it. But like, that's the thing about like ninth graders, like, or kids in high school, like in their mind, they're already adults, right? With their own idea of how they want to use their time. So like I remember the first class that I taught, like I'm reading out of this book, and I'm like, I paused for a second and I go, how many of you enjoy this? And like, probably like 3 or 4 of them, like, it's a class full like 25 kids, man. Like 3 or 4 of them raised their hand. I'm like, all right, look, we can do this a different way. We can do the workbook stuff, right? That's been given to me to do with you guys, or we can have some real conversations about things that you guys are curious about. And,
that's great.
And I can keep it a buck with you guys to the best of my ability.
And
Right. I'd introduce myself and what I do and, what my background was. Right. My big ask from them was like, be respectful, right? Don't be disruptive, right? Respect my time and respect the time of everybody else in this class. That's awesome. That was my favorite, because I can literally see in the eyes of these kids where they're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm just trying to figure it out, and like help me figure out the next step. These days, I find my time more given to, you know, people that I know that like have, like my buddy with this clothing line, helping him, you know, kind of organize his business, right? Like figure out how to take something that he's passionate about and see if he can make like a full-fledged business about it. Helping educate, you know, my friends or people that I meet that are trying to figure out how to start a business or trying to get smarter with their money. Right. Because there's a lot of people like around our age, man, that they might be really good with their money. They might not be so good with their money, and they weren't a product of an environment of like understanding how to use money or how to wield credit well.
Right.
You know, so I spent a lot of time doing that.
Awesome.
Most recently, I've been talking with somebody that I met not that long ago about trying to figure out a way that we can, you know, create something that helps prepare people of our culture for life after college, like in the corporate environment. Right. With some of those things, like I mentioned earlier, where it's like, you know, how to build a meaningful deck, right? How to read spreadsheets really well beyond just like the stuff that they teach you in college on how to move through the program, right?
How to type an email, a corporate email.
Corporate email. It's exactly right.
Yeah.
You know, like business lunch and dinner etiquettes, right? Happy hour etiquette. You know, like things like how to present yourself in a meaningful way where you make sure you get the level of attention that you're looking for in the environment, right?
Absolutely. That's great, man. I love that you've done that for so many people, and you know, I think it's important that we take time to give back always, and you know, because you're you know, you're still a young man, but you have so much knowledge and experience. You know what I mean? And and that's part of why I started this, because I want people to kind of get a peek into other folks' lives and, you know, what they've learned along the way and what they've you know, been able to accomplish, just to give them options. Like, okay, that's possible for me. Like he did that, and he was in a worse situation, you know. And so Karl, thank you so much for being on. It's such an honor. It's such a it's so inspiring just to hear about your family, you know, how they raised you, how you were able to come up, man, and to continue doing what you're doing is just impressive, man. Any shout outs, anything you want to say?
I actually wasn't prepared for that, but yeah.
I'm sorry. You don't have to.
No, it's fine. You know, like there's a lot of individuals out there that are trying to figure out like what the next steps are in their professional development. You know, so I do a little bit of like business coaching and professional coaching.
Oh, wow.
I've got a handle on IG. It's Soul Consulting, SOL Consulting. So you can find me on there if you're just looking to bounce ideas off of each other, or just looking for somebody to have a good sounding board. You can find me on LinkedIn. Karl Enriquez, Karl Enriquez, Enriquez.
Awesome.
Yeah, love connecting with people. Love kicking around ideas. Maybe it manifests into something. Maybe it starts other ideas. It's a breeding ground for other things.
Yeah, and hey, the Ambassador clothing line. Love the jumpsuit.
Yeah, Ambassador Clothing Company.
Love it.
My buddy Steph Elder. He's got an IG handle, Ambassador Clothing Co. Check him out. It's a faith-based clothing company with a really good mission and incredible fit. So
yeah, that's awesome, man. Karl, thank you so much, man. Again, appreciate you. Appreciate your time, your wisdom, and you sharing. And yeah, it's been an honor. And so
thank you. I appreciate it, George.